Once again, my Yu-Gi-Oh! Reviews took a back burner to other content on my channel, and once again, we are coming back to them after some time. And unfortunately for the 7 or so of you who actually watch these reviews, it's not much of an exciting comeback. This is going to be a very brief review with a bit of a discussion of a particular character at the end. But overall, I'm not going to take up too much of your time. In a sort of hilarious turn of events, if you really think about it, this review, which comes many weeks after my last one, is of a chapter which takes place immediately after the previous chapter. As Yugi and Jinochi are leaving the arcade that was the setting for the previous chapter, they are approached by this horrifying apparition and invited into his car, which for some reason they get into, because he says he comes with an offer from Seto Kaiba inviting them to his home. And all of this sounds like a good idea to them, for some reason. On their way to Seto Kaiba's home, they learn that Mokuba is in the car with them. They're questioning why and how Kaiba has a personal driver. And this is when we are finally told that he is the president of the illustrious and profitable Kaiba Corporation, a gaming company, that I am genuinely shocked they didn't already know he was involved with. His name is in the company's name, for crying out loud. Not only is Kaiba the president, but Mokuba is the vice president. They have money coming out of their ears, basically. So it's no surprise that Kaiba's house is enormous. What is a surprise, though, is that, while it does seem as if Kaiba wanted them there, he isn't aware of Mokuba's involvement in this process. Mokuba has his own plans for Yugi and Jinochi. Yugi, specifically. He invites them to have dinner with him, and they think that because the Kaibas are so rich, it'll be some of the best food in the world. Instead, it turns out to be a lot of common dishes. A hamburger, some spaghetti, without even any meatballs. What's up with that? Chocolate dessert, some pancakes, kids' meal, stuff like that. Things that anyone, anywhere can get pretty much anywhere. They're situated on a turntable like you might see at some Chinese restaurants. In fact, that's the reference that they use in the chapter itself. And so Mokuba says they should take the opportunity to turn the meal into a game. They'll take turns spinning the turntable and somehow not flinging the food all over the room, I guess. Physics, what even are they, right? And they will have to eat whichever meal lands in front of them. Jinochi goes first because he has very bad luck in anything except a game that he's supposed to win, and suddenly becomes ill, and this is when we learn that there's poison in some of the food, not all of it. And what Mokuba has effectively done here has challenged Yugi to a rematch of their previous game in the form of a Russian roulette involving food. The goal is to be the last one standing at the end, the last one who's unpoisoned. And if that's Yugi, Mokuba will provide him with the antidote to the poison so that he can cure Jinochi. And because the threat is larger than it was the last time, with Jinochi being threatened along with Yugi, of course the other Yugi comes out again. And just like last time, Mokuba is no match for him at all. He deduces very early on that Mokuba is using a false syrup bottle that he has sitting next to his place at the table as a switch to stop the turntable where he wants it to stop so that unpoisoned foods are always landing in front of him. Why he doesn't just use it to make sure that a poisoned food lands in front of Yugi, I don't know, but there you go. And Yugi is able to destroy the switch in a kind of convoluted way that's just crazy enough that I don't want to spoil it for you guys. Mokuba is forced to play by the luck of the draw. He ends up eating poison, and Yugi is savage enough, the other Yugi at least, is savage enough that he doesn't actually cure Mokuba, just Jinochi, but Mokuba's got his servants to cure him anyway. And we did, during this chapter, get another mention of Death Tea, and we learned a little bit more about it, that it happens tomorrow, and that it is a game specifically designed to beat Yugi. Paraphrasing a bit, but that's the gist of it. In the end, this chapter was only okay. It's clearly here just to fill space. I mean, it's obviously not here to flesh out Mokuba's character, because he ends up being just as ambiguously evil and just as two-dimensional here as he was the last time we saw him. We don't learn anything new about him here at all, except that he's rich, but we already kind of guessed that. We get another mention of Death Tea, and we learn a little bit more about it, but we could have gone into the next chapter with just the name of the game and the fact that Mokuba brought them to the mansion. And we would have learned the rest immediately as soon as the chapter started, so it doesn't really matter. This ends up being a pretty pointless detour. Nothing is different at the end of this chapter than it was at the start, except that Yugi and Jinochi are in a new location. And this is basically the last time that we see Mokuba like this, too. Now, if this had been used to show some growth or to show a third dimension to Mokuba's character, then I would understand why it's here, but it just isn't. It just doesn't do that. Though this is really the last time that we see Mokuba like this. The next time we see him, he's a little more desperate. He's a little bit more thoughtful, I guess would be a good word for it. He feels more like a three-dimensional character. But he's still not really consistent with the characterization we get for him later. Later on in the manga, it's implied, and in the anime, it's just flat-out stated, that Mokuba used to be the nice one. He's always been the nice one out of him and Kaiba. Before the events of the series, he was the nice one. After the events of the series, after he gets humbled by some of the things that happened to him in later events, he becomes the nice one again. He becomes friends with Yugi and his group, and he starts to treat them nice. But he never treats anybody other than them mean like this later on in the series either. I mean, he can be kind of harsh and kind of prideful with people, but that's just a Kaiba thing. He's not this ambiguously evil with anyone else ever again, really. Which means that he was a nice kid who got really mean and evil for a while and then became a pretty nice kid again pretty much immediately afterwards. It's odd. His characterization is just very uneven. And this chapter, which creates consistency with his first appearance characterization, doesn't help that at all. Now, I do like how he's wearing a Capsule Monster shirt here. That is a neat nod to good continuity, because as I've said before, if Capsule Monsters, the version of Capsule Monsters we got in the manga, had been fleshed out more, I think it could have been a really neat game. At the end of the day, though, honestly, I think you can skip this chapter. I mean, read the first few pages where Yugi and Jinochi end up at Kaiba's mansion, then just skip to the next one. It's just not important. I guess Mokuba's food was well drawn. It looked pretty tasty, the hamburger in particular. So that's at least a positive about the thing. But when you have an opponent who is just so far below the skill level of your protagonist, it's not fun to watch that character lose to them. It's not. Though I will say that watching Mokuba basically bang his head against the wall trying to be a threat to the other Yugi and failing miserably every time does kind of explain why he was relegated to the damsel in distress later in the series. It really does look like Kazuki Takahashi tried to turn him into a genuine antagonist and just didn't succeed. That said, though, guys, if you have read this chapter of Yu-Gi-Oh!, what did you think of it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.